Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition is called 4166, and it's been a couple of months, and by now you've probably noticed that there's been a report into the phase one of the inquiry process, and Moorbeck has concluded that the Grenfell refurbishment actually did breach building regulations. Now, this is actually a good thing in itself, apart from one big, huge glaring problem. Have you noticed that since that announcement, there's not been some flashing sirens and images of police officers kicking down doors, making arrests? I think what we've learned from this, and what we should take going into phase two of the inquiry, is that despite this outcome, nothing's changed. Now, I'm not even going to go into the conflict of interest issue with one of the panel members. That's been resolved, hopefully. However, what has been taking place is that over the past few weeks, several organisations have been demanding a get-out-of-jail-free card. And by that I mean they're saying that as a condition for them taking part in phase two, they want reassurances that they're not going to be prosecuted based on evidence or testimony that they're given. You see, what we've now learnt since the opening of the inquiry is that companies like Salatex and Arconic, they actually knew that the cladding was flammable. They knew it shouldn't be used. And this actually potentially opened them up to prosecution on the basis of fraud, selling goods that were not fit for purpose. But now, ever since the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, has actually agreed to their blackmail, because they were saying that they're going to remain silent. They wouldn't talk to the inquiry. They wouldn't answer any questions unless they had this immunity. What's happened is that if there was any prosecution that could be achieved on the basis of what they had said, the chances of a successful prosecution has now been severely diminished. Now, if you were watching the news a couple of days ago, you may have seen some footage of protesters inside and outside the inquiry disturbing the proceedings and actually saying, with this immunity, what is the point? What is the point of this inquiry? And they have a good case. However, this is a complex issue. I mean, while there are activists like myself included who do believe that justice means people going to jail, those who are responsible for the loss of life because of profit, because of callousness, because of indifference, they should lose their liberty. And even that's not enough to make up for the loss of life that happened under their watch. There are others, those who had to live with the results of this disaster, of this travesty, of this massacre on a daily basis, who actually just want to get to the truth. They just want to get to the bottom of what happened. They want to cut through the bureaucracy. And both positions are valid. And we have to be respectful of that. I mean, since this immunity has been granted, we've been hearing testimony from Studio E, and these are architects who have been involved in the design of the Grenfell refurbishment. And not only have they apologised for what that's worth, but they've also acknowledged that they haven't got a clue when it comes to refurbishment using cladding. They had no idea about what was safe, what wasn't, how to do it. They've never done something on this scale before. I mean, one of the useful things we have learnt since this immunity waiver is the term value engineering exercise. And this is where Studio E and the TMO, as well as the council, I want to get back to them, actually conspired to save 300 grand. And I didn't care how they did that. Now, of course, they're arguing it's just normal business practice, and of course, cost savings and reducing rates is a part of business. We don't want to waste cash. But when it comes to keeping people alive, when it comes to safety, when it comes to fire safetiness, there are certain areas that we can't cut costs. And it's really important that we remember that the TMO, and they were the project manager of this whole endeavour, are not some innocent bystanders. I mean, as far as we're concerned, and I'm talking about those of us in the Grenfell MediaWatch team, the council and the TMO, those who are running it at the time, those who are making those decisions and signing off on the cost, oh hold on, not cost savings, what they call it, value engineering exercise to kind of save 300 grand. They have some serious questions to answer. Doesn't matter if they've resigned from their post and they're lording it up somewhere else. And to those of you who think, Toyin, you're being really mean, you're being really harsh to people who are effectively just managers, who are just signing off on decisions which experts should have authenticated before, making it happen. Well, one of the reasons why this counts is because whilst the Grenfell situation is about justice in the criminal sense, that's how I see it anyway, there's also an element of justice in the social sense that we've got to deal with. You see, because the Grenfell survivors are continuing to fight the case for cladding around the UK. And as laudable as that is, that's not something that they should be burdened with doing. And you see, when we let the TMO off the hook, when we let the council off the hook, then what happens is that other residents around the UK are left at risk of actually going through exactly the same thing that the Grenfell families did. So if we look at Liverpool, there are 3 tower blocks over 18 metres high that are still covered in combustible cladding. If we go to Manchester, there are over 50 that still have similar cladding. This is a live issue. Now, the government may have allocated, I think it's around 600 million. But again, they're doing this, what do they call it? Value engineering exercises to kind of work out what's the cheapest way we can actually tick the box that signs off our responsibility, irrespective of whether it provides adequate safety cover. Looking at this through a social justice lens means not only just acknowledging the issues, but also addressing the fact that even Bristolians have been living under psychological pressure as they've been stuck in buildings, their homes, for over 3 years at the risk of being burnt alive while they sleep. This has not just a financial cost, but also an emotional cost. There was a protest outside Westminster last week, and it's an anti-cladding movement. And these are from normal people, you and I, up and down the country, who are actually fighting just to be safe. They're asking their government to keep them safe. And the government's putting 2 fingers up to them. So even though it seems like not much is going on, it's really important that the Grenfell families get your continued support. I mean, we're hearing now about residents and family members who are walking the streets at night. They can't stay at their homes at night because they're still suffering from that trauma. I mean, thankfully, the government has announced that a memorial is going to be built to commemorate those who lost their lives. And this is a long overdue thing. I still don't believe personally that the tower should be taken down until justice is secured, because there's a really, really compelling argument for those who say out of sight, out of mind. And that's exactly what's been happening. The Grenfell families, heck, the Grenfell community still needs support. Psychologists have actually made it clear that actually the second phase of this inquiry is continuing to open up old wounds. Healing can't take place while this sham of an inquiry is going on. Now, the good thing is that we're seeing artists lending their voice. So big up Dave, who followed in Stormzy's footsteps. The likes of Mumsford, who during their awards actually made a statement recognising that this is still a live issue. They shouldn't have to do that. This shouldn't still be a live issue. But we have to give credit where credit's due. But there has been some progress. It's not all doom and gloom. Out of the 201 households that were affected directly, we now have a situation where only one of them is still present in a hotel. I think 6 of them are living in temporary accommodation. It's still an omni-shambles, but things are moving in the right direction. And hopefully by the time I make this the next update, we can actually say that there are no families still living in hotels 3 years after the incident. Because of the value engineering exercise that was driven by the TMO and the council, human rights were breached and 72 people died. Now, if you take the £300,000 and divide that by 72, those at the top of these organisations valued the lives of each individual at £4,166. And they were rewarded with a criminal protection program. Because that's what this amnesty, this ability to actually have immunity from prosecution is. It's not a witness protection program, it's a criminal protection program. And that's not good enough. You see, because when those protesters actually said, what's the point during the inquiry, I watched as Morbit just got annoyed. And he said, look, we've got to be dignified. We've got to be respectful. You know, we had to listen to the testimony. Well, he would say that. He's on a fat paycheck, and every day he gets more and more cash. The longer he can extend this inquiry, the more cash he gets. Well, I'm not, please excuse my language, but dignity and respectability. Because they didn't have any dignity for those people who were burnt alive, or any respectability or any care about their safety when they were doing their value engineer exercise. I'm sorry for the bad language, but we've got to be careful that we don't become culpable in supporting an inquiry that whitewashes the truth. You see, because the last time that a criminal protection order was given, and that's what I'm going to call this immunity from prosecution, was in October 1999 with the rail crash at, I think it was Ladbroke Grove. And back then, you know, lessons had to be learned, rail track was scapegoated as an institution. But through the back door, the guy in charge, and the one most people felt was responsible for the crimes, got what they call a golden handshake of £1.2 million. That's what justice was to them. And even to this date now, justice still has not been served. And I think it was, 32 people who died? We have to learn the lessons of what happens when we go along and we rubber stamp these processes. There's a great scene in the thick of it when you see the minister's relief when they hear that an inquiry is going to be launched to look into the impropriety. They all know what it means in Westminster. An inquiry does not and is not synonymous with the word justice. So I'm sorry for the rant. I'm going to close off as ever and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.